This is Elon Wood recording the video of our home. This is our home in Pineville, Oregon, where we've lived for the last 30 years or longer. I think it was about 1950 when we moved in. This was all a alfalfa field when we first built our house here, and since that time we've tried to landscape it, but we're having trouble, as you see, from the gophers in the front yard. We've tried almost everything to get rid of the gophers, including flooding them with hoses, bombing them with poison gas bombs, traps, poisoned fruit poisoned with strychnine, and grain poisoned with strychnine. Other things that we've tried have been putting the blazer over the hole and using the exhaust running to the main runways for several hours at a time. None of these things have done any good. We've never been able to stop the gophers from building mounds in the yard. To the right here now is our orchard. At one time we had about 200 apple and fruit trees. Many of them back by the creek have been cut down by gophers. Others have died, and they're getting thinned out considerably. Right now we've added some pine and fir trees, which have been scattered in some of the vacant spots. However, the deer recently have been very hard on them, and it's possible that many of the pine trees will not survive. However, we've ordered some protecting plastic circular deals to put around the trees with the hopes that we may be able to keep some of them to grow up into trees. This little oval here used to be covered with junipers, but it got so thick and so high that eventually we put a match to it and burned them all down. And now we just have one little tree and 3 junipers to landscape it. The rail fence around the yard is made out of rails which are brought down from Jerry Breese's homestead up on the Combs Flat homestead. They'd used some of them, several in the family, and what were left they decided they didn't need any more as they were all falling down, and were replacing the rail fence with wire. So together with a couple of the grandchildren, Ken and Mark Tinseth, we spent several days hauling down the best of the rails and putting them in around the yard here. Before that we had a wooden fence which required painting, and as they were starting to rot, we were very happy that the Breeses gave us the opportunity of bringing down the rails. The gophers seem to be digging up along the sidewalk, so they may have a runway that goes underneath the sidewalk here, and eventually they'll probably get on the other side of the sidewalk. As you can see, the deer have been here in the yard too. Every night they come in here. In summer they not only were in the yard, but they spent practically the whole day lying either in the backyard or in the orchard under the trees. They seem to have adopted our place. Sometimes as many as 30 to 50 of the deer at a time can be counted. This wagon was one given to us by Frank Thorne, Luella Hawker's husband. It was one they used when they were on the ranch over at Suntex near Burns, and they gave it to us Since that time we've had it out here and painted it several times. Todd painted it the last time with a green paint this last summer. However, the weather seems to change the green paint to blue gradually. Then this large logging wheel here was also found up in the Ochocos near the old Frank Thorne mill up near Allison Ranger Station. Frank Thorne told us that about the time of the First World War, when they were logging with teams of horses or mules, that this was brought down from the Dalles and was used only a very short time up in the Ochocos for logging. And following that, it was abandoned, and he thought he remembered where it was left. So with the truck, he and his son Raleigh Thorne and I went up there one time, and we located it. It had rotted so badly that both wheels had fallen over, and most of the spokes were rotted. This wheel is in a little better shape than the other one, and I've put it back together and use it here in the yard. The other wheel had part of the iron rim cut away, and since that time I've had the rim repaired and had a new piece bolted on, and it is still lying over here by the fence. I've intended to try to find enough iron work so that I can put it back together so it'll resemble a wheel eventually. This old mower is one that we used around here for quite some time when the children were doing some of the farming here, and also when my uncle Ralph Wood and also various hired men worked here to put up hay. For several years we kept a bunch of registered Herefords here in the wintertime and fed them. I can remember when Donald and Elon Lee would get up every morning, early in the morning, to feed the cattle. They had to start the pickup with a tractor and haul hay out to them every morning and usually every evening after school. We put an electric fence out around the edge of the rail fence in order to keep the cattle from rubbing the rail fence down. At the present time, we have the electric fence going clear down the entire lane down to the highway in order to keep the cattle off the road. It's keeping the lane a lot cleaner, and we have a good road going down to the highway at the present. This is our garbage dump. Sounds better to call it a landfill nowadays. We've used it for quite a few years and still have very few things in there. We buy most of our things in either paper or something that can be burned, and have very little glass or tin cans to dispose of. It should be good for the next 20-30 years at the rate we're filling it up. Our gas pump here hasn't been used for many years. It's an old antique one, and the main reason it hasn't been used is because the tank underground here sort of rusted away, and we haven't dared use it or tried to replace the tank since that time. Now that we don't use a tractor very much anymore, there's really not much need in keeping gas here at the house. The Blazer is a 78 Blazer. We still only have maybe 30,000 miles on it, so we don't use it as much as some people would, as long as we have two others. One of the cars is a pickup, a 73 pickup that we use around the ranch, but it isn't used very much either. The car we have at present is a Riviera Buick that Mike just put a new engine in, and we're using it at the present time for our main car. Here we have a bunch of old antiques. There's an old wooden bedstead which was brought from Iowa in my grandfather's house. This was in the north room upstairs. Also, there are a lot of old skis here that I and the various children used at various times. Most of the other things in here, still an old wash tub, a record player, a few other things. Down on the ground here is a wooden antique harness repair. The person sits on the back end there and puts the harness or leather that's being used between the clamp sticking up at the top, and this can be held tight by a foot treadle. In the back of the shed here we have a few antiques. Our tractor is stored here for the winter, our lawnmower, and in the corner is a lot of old wagon wheels and one or two broken down wagons which haven't been used for many, many years. Together with the front field, is all leased out to our neighbors, the Jerry Priestes. They do a beautiful job of taking care of the fences and taking care of the land around here. They're wonderful neighbors to lease the land to. Children's wagons and tricycles and various things are all lying around abandoned at the present time, and they're only used occasionally when the grandchildren come to visit us. The little car there was one that was given to Donnie when he was a child, and it's held up in pretty good shape for the use it's had in the last 30 years. Not many people use a solar dryer anymore. As you go through the towns now, you very seldom ever see clotheslines. The back room there used to be a two-car garage that we very seldom used because we brought out so many things from Webster City, and it was used to store as a storage and used as a bedroom when my Uncle Ralph Wood was here, and we had extra people around. So eventually we had so many things in there that I took the double garage door off the north end and put up a wall. Now I call it a museum, but it's more a storehouse than a museum at the present time, as you'll see when we get looking at the inside of the old plow. Has seen better days, and it's merely put out here on this empty piece of land for decoration. We used to have a shallow pool in this circle where the arborvitae are, but it's so difficult to keep the pool clean that we finally had it filled in with dirt and bark dust, so now it's just used as an ornamental area. The water from our heating system is discharged into this pool, and then from this pool it runs into the creek. When the creek is dry, as it is this year, sometimes this water that we discharge into the creek is the only water left for the cattle to use on down the creek. In the background is a bench that I made out of old brick, and also used some of the stones that were cut to use in the First Baptist Church when it was downtown. After the church was demolished, I brought some of the stones out here and used it on the bench and as decoration. These arborvitae trees used to be completely filled with foliage clear to the ground. The beaver have been eating some of them, and there's a gap where the beavers keep dropping one every now and then. And then the deer come in and eat all the lower branches off as high as they can reach from the ground up. So it looks like some of these arborvitae have seen better days. Uncle Ralph helped build the barn here several years ago, And for a long time the children used it to put their 4-H steers in and various other animals that they used in their 4-H. At the present time it has a little junk stored in the upstairs, an old antique bathtub and a few things in the bottom. We've had at least 2 different bridges going across the creek. This path here at one time went around the blue spruce on the left side until it was covered up, and so I made a different path around the right side. The barbecue was built here probably about 30 years ago. The front part is a nice barbecue with an open pit for barbecuing steaks or meat or hamburger on the left side, a fireplace in the center, and in the back is a tool shed where we keep, among other things, our tools and some of our supplies. These white stumps here were pieces of a weeping birch that we cut down because it was too close to the barbecue, and some of them left around for decoration. We have windows clear across the entire south side of our house, which give us beautiful solar heating in the wintertime, and the overhang shuts out the sun in the summertime. We used to have air conditioning in the house, but we tore it all out at one time because the trees that grew up on the south and west side sheltered it from the sun, so we very seldom got warm enough in the summertime to need any air conditioning. Now we'll go into the house and see where this water comes from and how it goes through our heating system. When we first built the house during the Korean War, the power company would not let us hook up to resistance heating. So we put in a homemade heating pump that has worked very well ever since that time to heat the house. In the floor and ceiling are copper tubing carrying the warm water. These pipes are approximately a foot apart in the entire floor and the entire ceiling of the whole house. The water comes up at a temperature of approximately 51 degrees, and 1 degree of heat taken out of it, and is discharged out here about 80 gallons a minute at a temperature of around 49 to 50 degrees. This wishing well was built by Mr. Cadle at one time when he built the fireplace and the wall around the barbecue. He built it as an ornament. He also built our fountain and did a good job as brickwork, because the brickwork has held up very well ever since that time. I built the bench over by the wall out of some marble which was taken out of the Ochco pharmacy when they took out their lunch counter. Just recently, in the last couple of years, we've put a wood insert into our fireplace, and so we enjoy some nice warm stove by the heating system in the living room. The heating system keeps the rest of the house warm during the severe winter days, but in the spring and fall and much of the summer, all we need is a little fire and an insert in the fire. Now I'm sweeping up dead flies here that come through the back here. They didn't quite finish up plastering the back of the wall here, so they climb in here during the fall. Did I ever tell you about this heating system here? This is sort of a homemade outfit with a double setup of 10-horse motors with a compressor, and the water circulates through this where the Freon cools the water, and it goes through the interchanger, and the heat then is carried in these pipes that circulate through the house. I've got a double setup in case one of them didn't work. We haven't used this one for a good many years. originally, we not only had the heating part of the system, but we had a cooling up here. So we had another complete setup of the cooler and the interchanger up here, which circulated cold air through the house for cooling in the summertime. But it's been so many years since we've had a warm summer, especially with the trees around the house, that I finally just tore it all out and tore out all cooling pipes up in the attic, and don't even use that anymore. This is a relay system that turns it on and off. I don't use it very much anymore. I just have it on a time clock. So the heating system just runs a short time in the morning and a short time in the evening, just as we need the heat. This is a good big hot water tank. It's the same one we put in when we built the house about 35 years ago. And I don't think they make water tanks that last that long anymore. In fact, they don't make electric motors like this that last long anymore. We've got the same electric motors here. That same one has been running for 35 years to heat the house.
You want to start? Here in the corner is an old magazine which I've had for almost 40 years, and I still hang on to it. I use it 2 or 3 times a year when I iron napkins and tablecloths, and it's fun to keep, and I have fun using it. This is our deep freeze, and even though there are just 2 of us left here, it seems like for some reason or other we always get it full. As you can see by looking at it now. It's especially full this year because we had some apples, and so we made a lot of applesauce and apple juice. And then this year we did some planning here and changes in our utility room. Before we didn't have any cupboards in it, and so we had cabinet man make us a lot of new cabinets, and we do enjoy them, and it makes things look a little bit neater, where we can store things. That's just sitting them around on the floor or on shelves. So we enjoy hiding them behind cupboard doors. And of course here is just plain utility, a washing machine and a sink and a dryer. Then over on this side is more storage space. I seem to have saved a lot of cloth and materials and things that I'm working on, and yet never quite get finished. So I store those things in here. And usually I can find what I'm looking for, even though it doesn't look too organized. Belong in here, we had it in the front hall, but it had a crack in here, and Elon mended it. It's an old antique chair which he bought at one of the hospital antique auctions, and there was another straight chair and a rocker that he bought at the same time, and he put a new cane seat in here, but it's not the caning that you do by hand, because this particular one came all put together and he just set it in there. But in some of our other things he's done the caning himself. In the hallway here, we have placed this old sewing machine which belonged to Elon's grandmother, and we have enjoyed having it here because it has memories for him. I'll open the door. In here is what we had built into the house when we built the house, and at the time it was to be a cold freezer room. But the machinery didn't keep working, and so we decided to just use it for what you call a storage room or a pantry. And anytime you have anything that's a storage room or a pantry, it soon fills up with clutter. The table service is the other, it's coffin. I've used it a lot. It's a tray that
Did you
kids
wanna-
bought. The family bought it for us on our 25th wedding anniversary.
You want to get some on mallow?
I can take one now.
You know, you better do that. You tell them where it came from. And then we'll show them our fruit closet.
Are you ready for in this hall, we also have built-in cupboards, which have been very usable and serviceable. And here it's just a back door storage for old coats and boots and shoes and things that we wear when we're working outside or out of doors. And it's just for everyday and hunting clothes. And ski clothes too, somewhat, when we go in the winter. On the top shelf, there is some of silver that we have, which is very special to us because it's a coffee and tea service and the tray, and it was given to us by our kids on our 25th wedding anniversary. And it has been used a lot. We used it for all the weddings of the girls and when we've had special things here, and also the church has used it and different friends have borrowed it. But this is just the coffee pot. And we treasure it because it was given to us by our children. Tarnish-proof bags, and they work beautifully because I keep them polished up, and when I take them out, they look just perfect. They don't seem to have any tarnish on them at all. So I'm very thankful for these. I made all of these bags for these. Okay, this is what we call the center of a household, because when we built our house, I wanted our kitchen to be in the center where you could be present for all the activities going on and see what's going on. And I also wanted plenty of eating space. So I think that's what we got when we built our kitchen. It's very built for utility. We have stainless steel tops. We moved here in 1951, so that's 37 years, and the stainless steel tops are just as wearable now as when we moved in. They may have a few scratches on. And we have this built-in oven. This is the same oven that we had here when we moved in, and also the stove is the same one that we had. We've had to replace it with a few new burners, but it's the same stove that we had. And the dishwasher has been replaced once. We haven't had one new one since we moved in, and we enjoy using the dishwasher. The linoleum floor with the coving and everything is also the same linoleum. It does show bits of wear. It has dents and so on in it, but I guess that gives it personality. And it's a place that we have enjoyed using. There isn't too much that we can say about this because this is just an extension of our kitchen where the family has always eaten their meals. And we built it large enough that it gave us plenty of space. And with our family of 6 children, there were always 8 of us around the table. And most frequently there were others because we usually had 10. There was always some extras around. This dry sink over here on the corner, maybe you wish you would. Elon?
What?
Where did this dry sink come from?
Well, that dry sink was one that my grandmother had in Webster City, Iowa, and I think it came from her mother in Wisconsin. At any rate, it was used in Webster City, and then later it was given to my mother when she got married. They take it out to Nebraska, where they didn't have any water in the house. See, the inside of it would have a bucket here with a dipper in it for water and a wash basin, and you could have soap and you'd wash your hands and face right here when you came in from the field. Inside were these 6 drawers where you can keep your towels and various things right there in the kitchen. And then when my father and mother left Nebraska in 1915, this was taken back to Moorhead first Ralph Wood, his brother-in-law had it, kept it in Nebraska, and then later it was taken back to Moorhead and it was used in a cabin in Castana. And when my mother moved to California, and then up here later on, it was brought up by the people that bought their house in Castana. Oh yes, this typewriter here was one that was in Dr. Rosenberg's office when I bought his equipment in 1942. And we used it in the office as long as I had my own office. And then later I brought it out here at the house. And now I'm using it to type my grandfather's Civil War letters, my mother's and father's, and various relatives. And I probably typed several hundred letters on that. Even though I don't know how to type, I've gotten now so I can almost use 2 fingers at once and using it to type my letters. It still works.
You ready? This is a spoon collection that I started in 1958 because at that time we took a trip for 15 months and traveled in many countries. So different ones of us decided that we would start collections, and mine was a spoon collection. So as we went from country to country, I tried to get a spoon in each one of the countries. And in the course of our travels, we were in 42 different countries, but I didn't get a spoon in every one of them, but a lot of them I did. And I collect spoons I like to collect them myself, not necessarily given to me as gifts, but just I like to get them in a country that I'm in. Otherwise, I don't really have an extensive spoon collection, but just from countries where I've been. This is a microwave that I've had for a couple of years. Elon bought it for me for Christmas because the kids all thought that since they all had a microwave that maybe Mom should have one too, and we have enjoyed using it. And up here we keep our glass dishes that we have. They are very old. I mean, not real old, but we got them before we moved down here, so probably they're about 40 years old. But and they were not expensive dishes, but now I see them in antique stores, some of this exact kind. It sort of resembles your Fostoria crystal, but it is not the Fostoria, but it is very nice, and we've enjoyed using it through the years. Okay, we want to show you some things here in our dining room. This is a buffet that we had built in. We keep various assortment of things on the top of this. Sometimes it looks real neat and sometimes it's a little cluttered. But these candlestick holders are some that Elon brought from down in Willowbrook when they moved his mother up here. And it was out in the shed, and we think that perhaps they belonged to his Uncle Elon. We don't know if they were any further back than that or not, but we think they're very pretty. And this is a picture that we bought back at Jamestown, New York, as we watched the glass blowers make them, and that was fun to watch, and so we did buy a picture from that. This is a crystal candy dish that Elon got for me at one time at Christmas, and a bamboo vase which Janice gave to us when she came back from Hawaii at one time, and it's sort of cute with flowers in it. These were made by Hazel Dinton and were given to us one time at Christmas. This is a pretty glass dish that Elon bought at an estate sale, which had belonged to Leo Marie Gray, who was a dear friend of ours. Now inside here we have the only sterling silver that we have. I'm not sure the name of the pattern, but it's a very plain pattern, but we bought it the year that we lived in Vienna, and so it's Austrian sterling, and the pieces are just a little larger than the pieces that are made in America, but we used it all the time during the year that we lived in Vienna. It was the only silverware that we had, and we use it now for holidays and when families are here and for special times, and we've enjoyed having it. One year, Elon bought me a gift of the month gift for a present, and these were one of the things that were given to us, and these are silver, which is made in England, and it's a little pastry forks. And when somebody comes and we have pastry, then we have those, but then we use those. Down below is the silver that we got when we were married. My dad gave us a set of 8 at the time that we were married, and it is the pattern is First Love, and it's a Rogers, a plate silver, and we have used it a lot and enjoyed it. My dad bought us a set for 8, and then later Elon found in a store another service for 8, which is a little bit different. The knives have the longer handles and the shorter blade, but otherwise they're the same, and so it gave us quite a few additional, and twice this winter already we've used them all. We used them at Thanksgiving time, and then when we had another party here, so they're used a lot. This table is a solid oak table. It's an old antique table with the big legs, and it has a beautiful finish on it. We bought it from antique dealers at the mall in Bend at one time, and it has 6 chairs that go with it. And since this is our 50th anniversary year, we do have some cards that are coming, and so it's fun to put them up so we can see them, and it reminds us of the friends who gave them to us. Oh, thank you. This picture is a picture that I always saw when I was a little child when I went to visit my Aunt Daisy. And my Aunt Daisy was my mother's oldest sister. And after my aunt died, it was taken out of the frame and was rolled up. And at one time when I was back, I inquired about it, and they found it somewhere, and so they gave it to me, and I brought it home, and then I had it framed. And it's an old picture. Probably a lot of people have seen it, but I always thought it was so cute, of the cats and the dogs. So we've enjoyed having it there. In here is the French Hamelin china, which belonged to my Grandma Chio, my mother's mother. And when I was in high school, I lived with my grandmother to go to school, and I worked there for my board and room. And so whenever they used these dishes, I had the chance to wash them. And I was always so afraid that one might get broken. But anyway, my aunt Bertha thought that because I was the one who had washed these dishes so much, that perhaps I was the one who should have them, and so she gave them to me many years ago, and I treasure them. I think they're very special. There is a service for 8 which has both the dinner plates and the luncheon plates, and the soup bowls, and the salad plates, and gravy bowls, and vegetable dishes, and also a covered tureen. This coffee pot up here was a wedding present for my mother. And my mother did not have very many pretty things. She was married during Depression time, and a lot of her life was lived during Depression time. But it was the one real pretty thing that she had and thought was so special. And so So I was happy that it was given to me, and I've enjoyed having it up here on the shelf. These egg cups here are some that we bought when we lived in Vienna for a year. And then some of the dishes down here are dishes that were given to us on our 25th wedding anniversary, and they have the silver on them. I also had a cup collection, and I have them up here, and all of these are English china, bone china, that I have collected. And so when I have ladies here for a tea party, I use the cups. Men don't particularly like to use dainty little cups, but women do. There is a lovely vase in here, which was made by my stepmother. She did a lot of ceramics, and we have several ceramics around the house that she did. But she got advanced in her work, and she did some work that had gold on it. And so this is a lovely one that she made. And in the front hall is a picture that she made too, with a lot of the gold on it. And I think that it has Rosalie's name on it. These cupboards here are just for linen storage, and have napkins and lace things, and I do have some pretty cloths and different cloths. I have one here that these, this one and this one are special to me because we bought both of these in Vienna when we lived there, and we used them all the time when we were in Vienna because, along with our silver, those were the only things that we had, some of the things that we had bought, and so they're real pretty and sort of special. This one we bought in the Ivory Coast the year that we spent there, and this pretty cloth, when we were visiting in Czechoslovakia, Elon has a pen pal, a stamp pal there, and we visited them, and when we left, she gave this to me, and so I treasure it because she made it and gave it to me. It's something that's pretty to put out at Christmas time. And down below is just other tablecloths and so on that we use.
Shall I mention that underneath this drawer of tablecloths here, I have a secret compartment down underneath there, underneath the piece of pasteboard and plywood, there where I have hidden some gold and silver coins and things like that. So in case a house burns down, we don't want the kids to forget that there's might be a little melted gold in the middle. And also, I hope the robbers aren't watching this video and know where we hide our things. Up in this cupboard here is where we store our chairs and extra leaves for the table. But I have a lot of blueprints here of the house and various projects, buildings we've built in the past, and also some long genealogy charts of my mother's family, my father's family, the Stearns genealogy, ones like that. There's one thing that Margie mentioned that I think I should mention here, and that's a set of dishes. When Janice and Elon Lee were in college,
That was in 64.
in '64, they spent the entire summer over in Europe bicycling, and they had just enough money left when they started to come home to buy this set of dishes. So they rented a car and went back to the dish factory that she'd already seen and bought us a whole set of these specially made dishes. Each one is different, and we really enjoyed them. We use these for soup bowls all the time, and there's several large dishes. There's a couple that got broken, I think, on the way home, but the rest of them are all still in perfect condition. And Margie wants Janice to have those one of these days. She's the one that really picked them out, and I think was instrumental in buying them for us. Now we'll show you a few more things here in the living room. This furniture is all new. These pieces here came from a red bay rooming house that we tore down. That is on where the clinic parking lot is now at the present time. It was an old boarding house, and I took it, and when I tore it down, I brought some of the furniture home. None of it is very valuable, except maybe one piece that was marble top, but the rest was very poor furniture. But we've taken and refinished some of it and still using it. Now I'll tell you about this rocking chair. This is one from my grandfather and grandmother's home in Wisconsin. When they got married, they were given a second-hand rocking chair that was stored in somebody's granary. And in some of the letters, my grandfather mentions that he's sitting in the one-arm rocking chair because this arm is gone. And after I got it, I had a man out of Colby put a new arm on here that he carved out and sort of matched the other, although it doesn't perfectly match. But my grandfather always called it his one-armed Boston rocker. And we never had pads in it, but Margie made pads for it, so it's a little softer to sit on. The rockers are getting pretty thin on the bottom after probably around 75, 80, 90, 100 years of use. Fastened together with bolts and screws, but it still works. And I want to tell you about this ice box. As far back as I can remember, this was in my grandfather's house when I lived with him in Webster City, Iowa. And I can remember at one time that we did have ice in here, but most of the time we couldn't afford it because it cost from 10 to 25 cents to fill it up with ice. And I can remember when I was little that I tried to hide in here. I can't remember now whether I was able to get in, but I can remember trying to get in to hide when we were playing hide and go seek. And I put in a few things here that are my grandfather's antiques. This is a silver-plated butter sheet. There's two of them here. I think one of them was my grandfather's and one was my grandmother's. They're sort of, the silver is worn off. This tureen here, my grandfather picked that up when he went to Chicago. He went to the University of Chicago, and one spring when he visited there, the Chicago fire, which happened several months before, I think the fall before, was still smoldering. And there were a lot of souvenirs. He picked this old burnt tureen. It's turned black from the smoke and the ashes. But it's a souvenir. This is an old jug with some antique kitchen instruments. In here are some butter and cheese molds that my great-grandmother used when she made cheese and butter to sell. Here's a butter paddle. And what you did, you filled this bottom up with butter here. And then when you pushed on this, it made an imprint, a pretty flowery imprint on the top of the butter. And just a few other antique coffee and sugar and creamers and so on there in the bottom. This is a new duck that Margie fell in love with when we were over at the coast summer. And so I bought it for one of our old lamps from Webster City. I can remember when our electricity was put in there, and previous to that time we used lamps. This is not not a family heirloom, because I bought that at a sale probably 30, 40 years ago. And this is an antique flower stand, but that's one we bought also. Now this chair is a family heirloom because my mother had two rocking chairs, very similar, in the house in Webster City that she got from my grandfather. And whether they came from my grandfather or great-grandfather, I don't know. But my sister and I divided them up, and I let her pick the one she wanted. I think both of them had the backs and seats out. At any rate, I had to rekeen this. When I was a little boy, I can remember my grandfather rekeening a couple of chairs at home, and I helped him about 60 years ago, so I sort of remember how it was done. So I bought some cane and rekeened that and several other chairs that have cane bottoms. This clock is not an old one, it's a replica of the one that Thomas Jefferson made and had owned, and it's now in a museum in the East. And it was made with the Franklin Heirloom Furniture Company, and we've enjoyed having a grandfather clock. My grandfather never did have a large clock like this at his home, so it was nice to have it. His picture was, the story behind that is that after we went to a family reunion 3 years ago back in Nebraska, we visited the site where my father and mother homesteaded. And this is supposed to be a picture of my mother's homestead there in Nebraska. The entire township there, 36 square miles, and there's only one house left in the entire township. The rest of these old homesteads, in which there were probably at least 50 of them, have all disappeared. And so Marge so liked the windmill that we saw there, she asked Claude Hurst, a painter here in Prineville, that he would make a picture of the windmill, just a small picture of it for my birthday. And after about 2 years, he finished this picture here. He kept asking us for pictures of our homestead, pictures of the area, and not having ever lived or seen that area of Nebraska, it was a little hard for him to picture it. But from some of our photos of this sod house, he pictured the sod house, the outhouse, the barn, and the buildings, and the windmill, and it looks very much like it does in Nebraska. This table here is one that Marge's folks had back in Iowa, and they gave it to her, and she prizes that. These other things aren't really antiques. So this was a coffee table made out of redwood burl that a woman here in town that only owed me a little money wanted to sell it to me. So I finally bought it from her. And we sort of enjoyed it. It needs refinishing, but it came from a Mrs. Leo Alexander here in town. A lot of these things up here we've collected, and we change them from time to time. Some of those elephants and rhinos came from Africa. Also these pots, the fan, and some of these things came from China and Japan. Those bronze figures there were made by an artist in Ivory Coast, which is now Cote d'Ivoire. And also these figures up here were made there. Some of these others I brought last fall from when we were in Tibet. They had the prayer wheels, in which the prayers are all inside of there. 2 prayer wheels, and here's a roll of Tibetan prayers in case the others don't work. We put these in. And some of the chimes that they use there in Tibet have a sound. Here's a homemade knife that a lady sold me in Lhasa. She had the thing for sale, and she looked so poor and ragged, I finally bought it from her to help her out. It's nothing very fancy, but it's certainly a characteristic of the Tibetan work that they do in their home. Well, let's see. This table is one that I made about 45 years ago soon after I came here. I took a course of woodworking at the local high school, so I made 3 tables and made a lamp This wooden lamp is one that I made here at high school also, and we sort of enjoyed it. This chair has an interesting history. I think along about the turn of the century, my grandfather bought that and gave it as a present to his cousin who lived in Kansas City. And the reason was that my grandmother, when she had cancer, went down and stayed with her for several months in Kansas City to take treatments, some sort of treatments for her cancer. And later on, because of he felt indebted to her, so he bought this chair. And I think I've seen a chair something like this. They call it a Morris chair, and I think they're in the catalogs of about 1898. The Sears and Roebuck catalogs. Some very similar to this with the same name. It has a recliner like that so you lean back. And then after my cousin moved to California, about 1915, then she decided that the chair should be my grandfather's. So she had shifted back to Iowa to Webster City. And so that about as far back as I can remember, the thing sat in a house in Webster City when I lived with my grandfather, and this was always his chair. And then on top of these arms, we had a thick pasteboard sewing thing that had a ruler on top, and my grandmother would sit in that and do her sewing. And then after she died, the only thing we used it for was for writing. So my grandfather quite often would sit in the chair with this board on top and do his writing in this instead of going to a desk because he thought it was more comfortable. This sewing basket was in my grandmother's house as far back as I can remember, and at one time it had some legs, so it stood up about this high. But I think one or two of the legs were broken. And Janice saw it here, and for Christmas she sort of stole it out of the house, put new red cloth in the bottom, red cloth in there, red ribbons on it, cut off the legs, and sort of refinished it and dolled it up and gave it back to us for Christmas one year. So we've used it here in the living room for a sewing basket ever since that time. These lamps are the same ones we had when we first got married. That's so long ago, 50 years ago, I've forgotten where they did come from, but I think we probably bought them at a local furniture store. This table here was in Dr. Rosenberg's office when I bought all of the equipment out of his office in 1942. And I took over his practice. I thought it was used put instruments out, and in those days they always kept all their instruments right out in the open, and I suppose if they used them they dusted them off, but we've used it to put our planters on here. This ship's light down there in the corner, I think was one that Mick Borden gave to us, and it's an old antique. This old drum is one we picked up in Africa. The kids liked it because it made noise. So all the time we were driving through Africa and coming home, they had something to drum in and make a noise in the car. This table is an antique table that Gary Borden sold to me. It's real nice table. We prize it. Got a couple drawers there, the original hardware on. This lamp is one that Margie's stepmother made, and he gave to her. It's ceramic and all trimmed with gold leaf around there. It's really a prize. Now in the back here, in the corner, is what we call a flip knop. I suppose it got the name because you never knew what the people were going to put on it. This was in my grandmother's house in Webster City as far back as I can remember. And I think it belonged to her folks and came from Wisconsin originally, but I can't say for sure on that. The interesting thing is that most of the pieces of decoration on here are made out of leather. These drapes are pieces of leather wrapped over wooden marbles. And these are pieces of leather that are all shaped in the shape of leaves, fruit, various things like that. And the only place in the world or any museum that I've ever seen grapes like this made out of leather was when we visited a museum back in Cheyenne, Wyoming one time. And in a desk there where they had a few old things, I saw 2 little tiny bunches of grapes made out of leather. And they were the only ones I've ever seen. I have no idea when they were made or who made them. And I've never seen them in any other museum. A few of these I've had to add plastic things on because some of the leather had gotten so badly dry and broken up that it's no longer usable or it had disappeared. So 1 or 2 of these flowers I've added as plastic and then sprayed them black so they resemble the others. These things came from my grandmother's house in Webster City also. There used to be a set of these, but I believe these are the only 2 that are left. And some of these others I've bought for Margie. This came from China. That horse is an old one that was bought. I think came from India. And these photograph albums, there's 5 of them here. These are all old photograph albums that I brought from my grandmother's house in Webster City. And some of these are from my great-grandmother and some from my great-grandfather. This one came from the grandmother's side of the family because all of these came from our Waukesha, Wisconsin. And that was my great-grandfather's home. Here's my grandmother when she was a little girl. Anna Bassman was her name at that time. And this was taken when she was going to school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at a women's college. Now, others of those are of my grandfather's. One of them is full of his comrades in the Civil War. And several of them had the picture taken, and so they had the picture in his book. This here I call a bed pan. It's, as you can see, it's a bed warming pan. It's been used because it's all full of soot and charcoal. And of course our bedrooms were never heated back there in Iowa in the wintertime. And we always either took a stone that we heated on the back of the range to bed with us, but I always wanted to use this because it was something different. And so I tried to get my grandfather to allow me to put coals in this and run this up and down the bed. But because of the danger of fire, I couldn't get away with that very often. So most of the time we just put hot bricks and hot stones to bed with it. And then in the morning we put the stones back on the stove and let them stay there all day to stay warm. The only antique things here are these andirons. And those came from Wisconsin. They belonged to my great-grandfather. When my grandfather was in Iowa, he had no fireplace, so he had no use for them. And those always just stood in the library in a corner between a couple of the bookcases. And I never saw them used until we came out here. And so I brought them out here and used them in the fireplace. And then after we put in the insert, all I do now is they're just sitting there for decoration. This clock is an old clock that my grandfather had, and I finally had the thing, took it over to the sisters and had the clock factory there, put it in shape, and it's run fine ever since. It's a Waterbury Clock Company from Waterbury, Connecticut. And there's a sticker back here that it was repaired once by a Lee watchmaker and jeweler there in Webster City, Iowa. I can't say how old it is, but I know it's one that came from Wisconsin probably, or before 1840. This is one of two paintings that were made, supposedly made by a cousin of my grandfather's, one of the Lee cousins, but I can't say for sure, and I've seen no date on it, no name, no identification on it. This picture here was painted by one of our friends, Noella Hawker, and we've enjoyed having it here ever since she gave it to us one Christmas. There's other painting over on the other side of the room that maybe you saw of the winter scene, painted by our niece, Elon Wood, and she gave it to us also for Christmas a few years ago. So all of the paintings we have been. This Christmas decoration is something that Laura made. The coaster wagon here was one I had when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I got it at Webster City. One wheel was a little loose and the back end was off, but in pretty good shape for being almost 70 years old. This is an antique plant stand here that we got at Redmond a good many years ago and refinished it. This is our library. Some of these books came from Webster City from my grandfather. A lot of the medical books here are some that I've had in Iowa City, and a few antique books there that I bought from Dr. Rosenberg. The top set of International Correspondence School volumes, approximately 100 and some volumes, or some that my Uncle Elon had when he was selling courses for the school back in the 20s and 30s in California. This table is one I made when I first came to Prineville, in the manual training department here. Took an adult education course, and I made 2 or 3 tables and 3 lamps that year. This rocking chair is one that my mother had in her attic here. I think it came from her mother's at the Webster City, and how far before that I don't know, but it's quite an antique. It had the bottom and back all broken out, and I recaned it with some cane that we got down in Portland several years ago. This cactus plant here, a Christmas cactus, as you can see from the blossoms here, we've had for 50 years. It was one that Noella Hawker's mother gave us a starter, and they lived in Bend many years ago. This is an antique wheelchair that wood with a cane back on there. Something that you couldn't get through doorways very easily now, so hasn't been used for a good many years. The painting in the background here is one that we got in Taiwan when a friend of ours took us to some. Here are some pots here that came from Webster City from my grandmother and grandfather's place that we've had for a long time. This couch came from our old farm home in Moorhead, Iowa. It's one that my father and mother had there in the house, and later took to Castaigne. We recovered it because it's pretty badly ragged, but made a good couch. And this side here, besides the books and a few family photographs, we have a tapestry that was found in the Redby rooming house here in Prineville when I tore it down in the 50s. And this picture here of the frame was also found in the Redby rooming house. Over this corner is this desk here was one that belonged to my grandmother's father, Sewell Baston, when he had a meat market in Waukesha, Wisconsin in 1860. And that we had a tall stool that he stood on, and with a sloping desk. This was used for a bookkeeping desk. And inside are some antique writing instruments, his old meat market ledger, and I've put inside made up a museum of old pens, pencils, rulers, and various writing instruments. This is an old lamp. In our cupboard here, we maintained our slide. We're up to 74 volumes of slides at the present time. The top ones have been put in the closet, put away in order to make room for the newer ones. And on this shelf we have our video library. This Royal typewriter is the one I've been using for typewriting these books of my father's, mother's, grandfather's, and great-grandfather's letters. I know it's over 50 years old because I bought it when I bought Rosenberg's office soon after we came here, and it was one that was being used then, and I've used it ever since. Here we have our library of films. These top ones here are mostly ones that have been bought, and these two shelves are all the home videos that we've been taking since about in the 1940s. I think the first one here is dated about 1946. So they've been covers about 40 years of our family. Here we have a built-in movie projector that can be run from the stall here, and shines out through the hole there. And it shines on a screen that comes out of the beam in the living room.
In this corner here is a marble-topped dresser, which again came from the Ridley when we brought the things out here, and we didn't do too much to it. We just sort of polished it up a little bit, and it's in pretty good shape. This is a fancy little picture with the parts from a watch that is was made in England of a so-called Mercedes. And this is a 50th anniversary gift which was given to us by Frank and Doris, my brother Frank and his wife Doris. And it's supposed to be a magic 4-leaf clover. And this pitcher and bowl here we bought out of the antique sale in Paul Butte. And we really don't know who it belonged to before we got it, but we've had it for quite a while. The pictures here on the wall, the bottom one, which is really not much, excepting that it means something to me because it hung in my grandmother's house in Webster City, Iowa, and it just has a cute little homey thought. This frame up here is another frame which belonged to Elon's family. I think they had it, I don't know if it was in the parlor or in their living room. Do you know Elon? He doesn't remember for sure, but it was in their old home there in Webster City, Iowa. And this saw up here on the wall was given to us by Mike and Laura one Christmas, and they had them do a painting. The person had a person there in Bend do a painting on it, which was supposed to represent the old home of Pete and Luella Thorne out in Suntex, and the saw had belonged to Pete. Laura was a little bit disappointed because they got the mountains showing when it really was sort of a flat, open country there, but anyway, it's a pretty picture.
Now that chair there was part of my grandmother's parlor furniture. It was only used for special occasions. The rest of the furniture is down there in the museum. And I'm sure that picture is a mill that's near Webster City, and I think it was painted by Lev Lee, or one of our cousins there at Webster City. But I'm not sure about that.
Do you want to do the particular?
the pot? This? Oh, this was that tea kettle that came from Holland when Mr. Bonder gave it to us when he was administrator of the hospital here. I think it's quite an antique, although it's getting pretty badly pinned up. Now, why don't you tell them about the things in here, Marky? These coffee cups or chocolate cups especially.
We had 4 coffee cups here at one time. Just 3 of them are here now because Elaine took hers. Mrs. Minger was a lady who used to babysit with our children when they were small, and when they were dispensing with their things, she wanted each one of our girls to have one of these coffee cups. And these came from Prussia, and they're quite valuable antiques. They have the RS on them now, which if you read about antique material, it says that they're more valuable when they have the RS and the star above it. And after Rosalie was born, she came out and brought us another one because she wanted Rosalie to have one too, so that each one of our 4 girls would have one. And we still have 3 of them here because the girls hesitate to take them home, but Elaine has already taken hers. This is a Hummel which we bought in Vienna at the time that we lived there. And some of these other things were things that we have just collected from different places where we have been. These that came from Africa, and some of the things over there are gifts, but not just sentimental value. These little egg cups also we bought in Vienna when we were there, and this is a pipe, a peace pipe, which came from Africa. We bought it at the time we were going through there in 1959. And there's also a elephant tusk which has been carved there in the back. And over here is a pitcher which has it's a ceramic pitcher which has the gold in it, which my stepmother did. She did a lot of ceramic work, and she did this. That was Helen Stearns, and she did this. She has her name on it. She did it in 1964, and this has Rosalie's name on it because this belongs to her when she wants to take it. Some of these other things in here are just rocks and arrowheads and a piece of petrified wood that came from Swartz Canyon. And I'm not sure about these arrowheads. I don't know who. Laura has her name on one, and I think Rosalie has her name on some, and I'm not sure just who they belong to. We'll just leave them there until they decide. There's a big shell over there in the corner, which I believe Ellen's grandfather gathered from, is it California or Florida?
I think that came from California.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Up here is just an assortment of books and games and nothing really particular. Down below is an assortment of children's books which need to be rearranged and sorted out and stacked up from time to time, but the children have enjoyed them. And
most of our games are in the game closet right over a projector there. I guess we didn't mention those.
this is a plaque which was given to Elon from the hospital when he retired, and it has sentimental value because it represents his years of ministry here in the community for 41 years as he served as a physician and surgeon in his family practice. This picture here is my dad, William Bradford Stearns, who was born and raised in Webster City, Iowa. And this picture was taken when he was in high school. This is a painting of my mother and her youngest sister. My mother was Grace Elizabeth Teal, and her sister was Bertha Ellen Teal. And my Aunt Daisy, who was my mother's oldest sister, had this painting, and she gave it to me one time when we were back visiting in Webster City, Iowa. So the one on the left is my mother, and the other one is my aunt, Bertha. This picture here is of my dad's family, who lived in Webster City, Iowa when my dad was born there, and they had 8 children. Let's see, is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They were all boys, but Aunt Alice, who was next to the youngest. My grandfather's name was Frank Griffith Stearns, and he came to Webster City and became a miller there along the Boone River, and he ground meal for the people who brought in their grain for him to grind. And he made lots of flour and cornmeal. And my oldest uncle is here on the right, who was Jesse Stearns, and this is my dad right behind him, who was the third one in line.
I think this is the Chase Mill in Webster City. At one time was run by Marjorie's grandfather, Mr. Stearns. The rest of these pictures, I think, have been in my grandfather and grandmother's place in Webster City. This is mostly just kept to the old frame. This is my grandfather, grandmother, Elon and Anna Lee, with my mother in the background when she was a little girl, Maud Lee. This is also my grandfather and grandmother with a picture of me in the middle. I think that was taken when we were out in California at the World's Fair in 1915, when we visited my Uncle Elon there. Some old Currier and Ives prints, which got a little smoky in Webster City, and I reframed them. This is Who's Afraid of You? This You Will You? This one here is a Nathaniel Currier. You can see it isn't quite up to the same grade as your Currier and Ives pictures, as Currier wasn't as good a engraver as Ives was. So this was done by Nathaniel Currier before there was a Currier and Ives. This is a picture that was drawn and painted by Betsy Ann Lee in 1835. It has her name on it here. She's the daughter of Elon and Lydia Lee, my great-great-grandfather, and this a memorial done also by Currier is representative of the memorials that were made in the early 1800s by Currier. This much was printed in a lithograph, and then the rest was added by the person who bought it that wanted to memorialize some of their relatives. And then this was hand-painted with watercolors, whatever color a person wanted. I've seen a few of these in museums, but not very often. On the other side are my great-grandfather and great-grandmother, Nelson Lee. She was a nurse in the Civil War, and he was a farmer in Wisconsin. And then this is my grandfather, their son. These always hung in our library in Webster City from the time I can earliest remember. This lithograph here is entitled The Sale of a Pet Lamb. It was bought in 1868 by my grandmother before she was married. I think it was bought by her father as a present to her. And it's mentioned in a letter, one of the letters that I've typed, that was written in May 7th, 1868 by my grandmother to my grandfather before they were married. And she said that it was sold by a salesman for the National Art Association in Waukesha. Outside of that, I don't know much about it. This is a batik, isn't it, that we got in Indonesia? Made out of silk. I think it's real nice. It has a signed by the artist, and date 75. In this cabinet here, we have quite a collection of junk, partly antiques, partly old things that were brought from Webster City. Some of them were my grandfather and grandmother's. A few of them are the toys belonging to the children. I don't think there's anything very valuable, but a lot of them are keepsakes. Like an old coffee grinder here, and there's an antique heading machine that belongs to Tom Wilson that I think he got from his grandfather. Frame of General Grant. I don't know where some of these things came from, but a lot of them are toys of either when I was a child or some of our children's toys. And these are our two bathrooms here. This one is one of the children's bathrooms. This is another divided bathroom, and in here are a balloon closet full of balloons and so forth. This was brought back from Africa, a shield made by some of the natives when we were in Central Africa. A lithograph that we had in Webster City that used to hang over the piano on the north side of our living room. And I have no idea where it came from. The only place I've ever seen one identical to it was in that Saudi Island at the Historical Society house that they have down there. And I was so excited in seeing a duplicate that I wrote to the curator of the Oregon Historical Society to ask if he knew anything about it. And he said he had no idea. He'd never been able to find out where it came from. That the edge of the picture had all been cut off in order to get it into the frame, so there's no identification on it. And he asked me if I'd take mine out of the frame and see if there's anything on mine. And mine also had been all cut off just at the edge of the picture, so there's no identification on it. I've never been able to find a book in any of the libraries that give a copy of this picture. So we're right where we started on that one. This closet here is full of various types of junk. And we've vacuum cleaners, a water tank, and floor polishers, etc., etc. We better just close that door. This picture here was drawn by my grandfather's brother, George Lee, when he was a little boy. And he always prized it because his brother died at a young age, and so he always prized the picture, the only one he ever made, I think. And this plaque here certifies that this is a marriage certificate. It's of my grandfather and grandmother when they got married in 1868 in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Just a certificate that they had filled out. This is another Missionary Society certificate of my grandmother's, and she was a member of the Wisconsin Missionary Society. I think also this life membership because of paying $50. This picture here is my father, Roy Anthony Wood, and this is a more recent picture of our family. My mother and stepfather and all of our children and grandchildren that we had at that time. What year was this made? About 19...
Well, it's in the 70s.
70.
Christian. Fern and Reverend were not born.
Must have been about 1977 then, wasn't it? With me when I had a little hair. And this piece of furniture here was taken out of the Redby rooming house. One of the pieces they had in each bedroom, where they had a pitcher and a bowl on each table, a hot towel rack for your towel, and a drawer for soap and so on, and in here a place to put the chamber pot. This is one of the original Audubon prints, of the first that he made in the large elephant size pictures. This is number 79 in his series, I think, of less than 200. This is the Louisiana Hawk. I bought that about 20 years ago from an antique dealer. And down at the end of the hall here is our gun cabinet. Some of my deer rifle and bought in Africa in 59. This is my dark room. Contains all my photograph albums, negatives. I'm developing chemicals in a lot of our photograph albums up here. About 20 or 30 photograph albums of the kids. Keep our cameras in here. There's a few old antique developing frames such as this, and you're supposed to put your paper in there and take it out in the sunlight to expose it. Get into sort of an office for my stamp collecting and office work. On the wall up here are 3 more Audubon original prints, one of the large size and 2 of the smaller size of his animals. Although Audubon is most noted just for his birds, he also did animal collections. And these are a few of my stamp albums. One of United States stamps, one of Belgium, Canada. This desk here is one that my grandfather and my Uncle Elon had. I think they had it in Webster City in the lumber office, and then at Lone Tree, Iowa. And my grandfather later took it to let my uncle have it in California. And then after my uncle died, my mother inherited it, and I got it from her. It's interesting because it has about 20 or 30 different drawers. I don't think I ever saw one, but many little drawers. It even has little tiny drawers in here on each corner to put your pencils in and pens. And then down in here there's more drawers that can be pulled out, secret compartments. And this, put your typewriter on. This is my certificate for practicing medicine. This is an old picture of the doctor that was found in Dr. Rosenberg's office when I bought his office. In here is just a closet full of Christmas decorations. This is a copy of a poem by McKinley Cantor in regard to my grandfather. He was the last GAR veteran to die in the Hamlin County in Iowa, and so he wrote a poem with the GAR. This is the rocking chair and that we have out in the living room, and this is a representation of a cane that I have from a great-great-great-grandfather. On the wall here is a painting bought in Indonesia when we worked over in Borneo for several months doing surgery. I think this skin up here was bought in Africa. These 4 prints are Webster City, Prineville prints made by Miss Paulson here in 1977, and many copies of these have been sold by the Historical Society here because they are all historical points in Prineville. When she was leaving town one time, she wanted to sell the originals, so I bought the 4 originals because I didn't think they ought to leave Prineville. This bookcase is one that we brought up from California when my uncle died in Willowbrook. And some of these books are my grandfather's and some were his. This wooden file cabinet I'm using for my business, and this one also. These files here are filled with stamps. Various foreign and American stamps. This picture up here on the top was given to me by the anesthesiologist at the University of Iowa when I gave anesthetics for 2 years when in medical school, and she gave it to me as a graduation present. Down here are files. This is one of the chairs from my grandfather. I think I had 4 of them and also a cane-back rocking chair, and I've had to recane all of them because the cane got pretty brittle, so I've recaned them. This is a chair of my mother's that she had in Willowbrook, California before she moved up here. I don't know how old it is, but we've always prized it as being a antique of some kind. And these cupboards here, now these are full of my letters that I've been typing, date back from 1836 on up to the present time. I think I have about 4 drawers full of letters. And here are more stamp albums. These are my world albums of the Scott International. Here are more stamp albums and boxes full of stamps. More stamp albums. These are more stamp albums. These drawers are full of my card collection. These are postal, and these are just a collection of postcards. Down in here are collections of old antique picture frames. In here I have old scrapbooks of my grandfathers and grandmothers. On the other side, they're mostly more stamp albums. And these are full of mint envelopes and postcards, and collection down here of my Czechoslovakian postal postcards and letters. I think that just about does it for this.
This is a room that used to belong to the boys, and after they left home, it sort of became my office and a collection of many things. I have 2 oak filing cabinets in here, which I've been able to keep a lot of things in, and this old desk in here belonged to Elon's grandfather and came from Wisconsin and was in the family home there in Webster City. The picture just over the bed there was a picture that belonged to my Aunt Bertha, and she gave it to me. It doesn't have any special significance otherwise, excepting that it's something that she gave to me. And the rest of the things in this room are just sort of general collection things. I do have sort of a hobby of keeping scrapbooks, and I have filed all of my scrapbooks away into these areas, and I have some bedding is stored up here, but the rest of this is just books and general collection of my things. Up above here are some old toys which they belong to our son Elon Lee, and he has not taken them yet, so maybe someday he'll pick them up, maybe for his grandchildren. This was the girls' bedroom when they were home. Changed sort of from one to the other. Their ages changed. This picture here was Janice's picture, actually, one that she had, but it's in a frame, an old frame, which belonged to Elon's grandparents, and they had in their home in Webster City. this a dresser here with a commode type thing. It has a place on the side for hanging things and in the drawers. And it was at the time that Elon's mother passed away. It was in the back bedroom of the house here in Prineville, and it was very black. It looked like we couldn't tell if it was a black paint or a very black varnish. But anyway, we in starting to take off some of it. I started right on this part of it, and I took it off of here, and I realized that it was a beautiful oak. And so we had it all finished, and now we can see it as a beautiful piece of furniture.
Yes, that frame of the feather wreath over there was one I think it was made by my Aunt Belle, actually my mother's aunt, Belle Cheesebro. She made that and another wreath out in the museum. And that's an old frame that it came from Webster City, but I'm not sure what the picture is. And this frame also, I think, is the
But
same.
that painting, maybe I should tell about that.
Yeah.
You want to come and hold this?
Tell them about this.
You want to come and hold this? Or do you want to tell them? I can't go any, I can't go any further. My head out of the way here. This is a frame that belonged to Elon's grandparents, but the picture in there, it's on a sort of a maroon velvet cloth, and the painting is done by my Aunt Alice. And my Aunt Alice, my dad's only sister, was a real good friend of Elon's mother, and she gave that to Elon's mother, and it was just on a piece of cloth, and so after Elon's mother passed away, I framed it there into that old frame which had belonged to the Lee family.
I think it originally belonged to my grandmother, but anyway, my mother had it in the home in Castana. She'd taken it there from Moorhead, and it was left there when they retired to California. And then the man that bought her farm in Iowa brought it out about 15 years ago, this together with the coat, and we refinished it, have it in pretty good shape at the present time. These cupboards are filled with various things, some old blankets and a few old antiques. That was just tablecloth in here.
It has an LED on it or something somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The bedspread really, but I think it's used for the one.
This spread that we've used for tablecloth more than anything else, I think. I'm not sure how old it is. It must be over 100 years old because it was made by one of the cheese mills. I think I was practicing here in Pineville. I had a lot of Indian patients that came over from Warm Springs, and one of the girls kept bringing her baby in that was quite sick, and she had it on a board, a papoose board, and I tried to buy it from her at that time, but of course she wouldn't sell the one she had. I really wanted an old one, but instead she made a brand new one and brought it over to me one day, so I thought it was a nice present because you don't see the Indian babies being carried this way anymore.
This roll-top desk here came from the office that Elon bought after he practiced for a while with Dr. Edkinson. He bought his own office equipment and from a doctor who had been here, and
Dr. Rosenberg.
Dr. Rosenberg, and he had passed away, and so he bought the office equipment from Mrs. Rosenberg, and this was an old roll-top desk which was there, and it's part of that equipment. And here is another bookcase, and the bookcase now has in it all the china that's in there belonged to Elon's mother and grandparents, and some of it's crystal, some of it's hand painted. But anyway, it has a nice sentimental value because of the fact that it did belong to in his family. This picture of Christ knocking at the door on the wall there is a picture which belonged to my Aunt Bertha and my brother and sister-in-law, who Frank and Doris thought that I should have it. And my Aunt Bertha had been in a retirement home in Fort Dodge, Iowa, and this was in her room while she was living and was there. And when my brother took her things, they thought that I should have it, and so they gave it to me. Behind the door here is another of the old-fashioned book covers that pull out and go back in. And this one happened to belong to Elon's family, and it came from the Lee home in Western City.
And these glass balls up here are some of the longer roads.
Yes, the large one was a particular special find, because one time when we were at the beach with the Whitmers, they went out early in the morning to just walk on the beach. It was a stormy morning and cloudy, but anyway, we walked on the beach every day anyway, whether it was stormy or not. And Rosalie found this big Japanese fishing ball, so it was a real excitement to find one that large. This dresser is another dresser that we finished. I did this one, but it was another one that was in the Red Bee. And up there.
In here are the more slide files. And in this cupboard here, closet here, are more slide files. This bed is relatively new. It certainly isn't a print, one of their small ones. This old bookcase is one that my grandfather had in Webster City, Iowa, and it's filled with some of his old books. These 5 books are the only books he had when he was a child, and they came in a set: Sears Book of Knowledge, Sears Book of the World, Sears Bible Geography, Sears Pictorial Library, and the History of the World. This is the original cover. His mother put a cover on each one of the books out of paper so that they could be preserved. And in the front of this book it says, "This book is one of 5 volumes bought by father and mother before 1847 at West Somerset, Niagara County, New York. They're called by us the Big Books." And it gives a list of the books. And my grandfather often told about how he was allowed to read these books. He had to put them on a pillow and like this, and then he could read them and turn the pages in order not to let them get torn. The other books, a lot of them are his ones he had in college at the University of Chicago in the 1860s. And on this side is a cedar chest that I made in 1930 when I was a senior in high school in Webster City, Iowa. Up here are some African elephants and various things. That clock is an old clock that my uncle Elon Lee had in Willowbrook, California. I think he came from my grandfather's in Webster City, but I'm not exactly sure how old it is. The picture in the corner of an African scene was made by an African artist who became a friend of ours when we were working at Perkesaduku in the Ivory Coast. He has since died of cancer, but he was known as quite an artist there in that area. The other animals are some we got in Africa. This old chair is one of my mother's and one of her old dolls. The drum is one we bought in Africa in 1959. And these Christmas wrappings are some we've just been using to wrap up Christmas presents with lately. Now in here is our dressing room, and These are built-in closets here. Built-in wardrobe, built-in desk. Up here, some more stamp books and stamps, various things up there. There's a few old antiques up in this cupboard. This in particular is an old cane that my great grandfather had. I put a note on here which says, this cane was given to my grandfather, Elon M. Lee, by his grandfather, who got it from his grandfather. It has the date 1762 on a silver band right around the top, and says Elon Lee, 1762. And I promised to give it to my grandson, Elon Todd Wood, eventually. As I think he should be, as long as he's named after me. These are merely our dressing closets. Some ski equipment and things of that kind. Underneath all these drawers, however, are some coins. They're all full of old coins and some gold and silver, which have been hidden there as we didn't have room in the safe deposit boxes in the bank. So underneath this drawer and that drawer, we've been keeping some of our valuables. That has a few gifts in it. This attic is mostly full of junk. There's a few antique chairs up here in poor shape of repair that we've always had hopes of repairing and refinishing someday, but I don't know that we'll ever get to it or not. Mostly our camping equipment, and there's a safe down inside of that box there that I brought home from the office that has a few valuables in, but nothing extreme value. Then in the rest of the attic is some other old antique furniture and various old bedsteads and chairs. Go. This room used to be a two-car garage at one time, and when we moved out from the town, we got so much junk in here that we couldn't even get the cars in. So eventually, I put a wall in the other end of the garage here, and took out the doors and put a wall in. And so now I call it a museum. That way I don't have to move the junk out. To start with, here's a few of the things. This is a security system up here, and these speak for itself. These are some Chinese handcuffs that we used to use at the office, because I put tied five of them up on a string with a weight, and by putting the patient's fingers in these, when they had a broken Colles fracture or a broken arm, I could hold the arm up like this, and I wouldn't need any help to put a cast on the arm. This is our brand. When we first moved out of here, we had some registered Hereford cattle, and so we called our brand Diamond W for Dr. Wood and Diamond W Ranch, and we had 3 of these brands made. Frank Thorne made them for us, and we used them on our cattle. Up here this is a female urinal. That's China bedpan. I'm sure it isn't very warm. Here's some of those dustpans for crumbs on the table. I remember my grandfather and mother used to use those on the table in the dining room. They had a little brush, and before serving dessert, they'd brush up the crumbs. Now this cabinet here is an old doctor's cabinet that I bought from Dr. Rosenberg when I took over his office about 1941. And a lot of the instruments were so obsolete, antique, that I didn't use them, but I kept them all. In here are various types of retractors for surgery. He said that he used to do quite a bit of surgery there. He and Dr. Belknap, when some of the boys became surgeons, of the Belknap boys, they came home and did operations for him occasionally. These are old schlitters that took out tonsils. You stick that over a tonsil in the throat and zip, and the tonsil was gone. Probably didn't need too much anesthetic outside of a little whiskey, maybe. The rest of these are, here's a male urinal that's made out of glass. And all these others are various. And then down in the bottom are a few more antique medical instruments. And here's some drugs that used to be used for syphilis in the old days before they had penicillin. In here we have some ether masks. I have about a dozen of those. We used to give a lot of anesthetics at the office with ether. As you can see, there's a lot of antique instruments there that haven't been used for many, many years. This closet is sort of a storehouse for junk. There are a lot of boxes of old magazines and newspapers. We've got some magazines that date back to the Civil War that are here in various places in the house. This is an old type thing in the old days when they sorted out type for the printing machines. There's some more medical instruments, all boxed up there because they didn't have room to display them. This old office chair is one that was used at one time at a desk. Needs a little repair job. I've often thought I'd fix it up and repair it, but so far I haven't got around to it. Here's a jack. I hate to try to jack a car up with it, but that's what it's for. This is a weight for a hitching post. If you wanted to tie your horse up and want it to run off, you tie the reins to this and then just leave it on the ground. And he wouldn't drag that very far with his bit. This post here has a history. When we tore down the Red Bay rooming house here in Prineville in the 50s, there was a story about some murders that occurred, and the sheriff and a couple desperados got into a fight, and there are gunshot holes through this post. There's a story about the murders, and I've often intended to get a copy of the story and put it on this post. And I've put it up there. This is from the Red Bay rooming house also. And I put the shelves out of old lumber from the rooming house and made a place for some antiques here. As you can see, here are some old milk cans. This is one that in Webster City we used to use for flour can, and this one here was used for a bread can. Of course, we had to keep bread covered up to keep it from drying out. Of course, it didn't have wrappers in those days. The bread didn't have any wax paper around it. We had to keep the mice and the weevils out of the flour, so everything was put into tin cans. Now, this is a centrifuge that I had in Dr. Rosenberg's office, in which it was used for centrifuging samples of blood or urine. And you turn it by hand, and the particles in the urine would all go down to the bottom of the glass tube. Here's a Bunsen burner that we used for laboratory tests. Had a little compressed gas. This is some ash came from Mount St. Helens during the eruption in 1980. We brought it home, often thought I'd make something out of it, but I haven't been. You can see here some old grinders, some old hair clippers, frying pans. This is one of those waffle irons that we used to use over an open fire in the old days. I think we've got two of them here. There's the grid inside. A person could just put it over the fire, and when it got cooked on one side, he just had a ball joint here, and it just turned over and cooked it on the other side. Here's another one. Then there's a few old irons here, various descriptions, sizes, and shapes. This fluting iron here is interesting. They say they used to flute the bottoms of petticoats and dresses in the old days with this, heated up hot. And here's some old antique cases and a stopper for sprinkling your clothes. They say that the Chinese in the Chinese laundries would get a mouthful of water and spray their clothes before they ironed it. But this is a little more modern invention. You just build up a bottle with any kind of a bottle and stick a cork in, and you just sprinkle your clothes. And there's quite a variety of things up here, some old mirrors, birds' nests with eggs in them, and various antique bottles. Silver spoons, German silver, that's from a cheese roll. Cuff buttons. In fact, I don't even know what it is in a lot of these. Magnifying glasses, a shaving brush, some old doll furniture. This was saved from the Chicago fire in 1871. My grandfather went there and the next spring, and it was still smoldering, but there was a lot of junk scattered around. He picked up quite a bit of it. An old ink bottle, evidently, and doll furniture, and some of it's in pretty bad shape, but makes good souvenirs anyway. Here's a camera that I used to use, a Brownie camera. Mortar and pestle. In the old days, the doctors a lot of times made their own medicine, and they had to grind up the various drugs and something like that. Here's another coffee or nut grinder. I'll say here's something might be interesting, because I used this for many, many years. It had two uses. One, as you can see, is all broken up, and here's where we cracked our nuts every winter. And this sat on the stove, on the back of the stove, the year around. And part of the time you used it to crack nuts, and then at night we wrapped a towel around it and took it to bed and put it in the foot of the bed to keep our feet warm at night. I think I used that almost every winter as far back as I can remember. Quite a keepsake. Now shall we go on the other side here? See what we got up here. Some old shearing scissors, an old scythe, sickle, saw, single tree, and axe that needs a handle, and some more sticks up there, various tools, as you can see. This, I asked people to guess what this is used for, and I found, except for some old farmer, I've never found anybody that could guess that this was used as a fly net to put over the horses and keep the flies off. And as the horses would shake, these things would keep the flies off from it. Sort of a catch-all for various antiques and horns and furs. This cabinet was in my grandfather's home as far back as I can remember. I think I have a history of where it came from. I know it came from Wisconsin originally, because some of the old letters talk about he and his brother putting things into this cabinet back in Wisconsin. And then he took it to Webster City, and it was kept there in my grandfather's house until we dismantled the house and sold it in the 40s. And I brought it out here. Most of the things in here are in just about the order that it was in, as far back as I can remember. As you can see, a lot of them are geological fossils, because his brother-in-law was a geologist, and he studied quite a bit of geology at the University of Chicago. And they made quite a few trips looking for various kinds of fossils. This is a cone that was taken from one of the hot springs in Yellowstone Park in the early days. And these are various geodes, various crystals inside. Here's a doll that my mother got from some Indians in Arizona when she was a little girl, along about 1908. These are mostly minerals. And here is a souvenir from the New Orleans Exposition in 1885. I often ask people what these are, and I found only about one or two people that recognize this as a slate pencil that they used to use. Here's one of those eggs that comes apart that comes from Chinatown. This is a silkworm cocoon that they pull the silk off from to make silk thread. And then here's some bullets with the powder brought from the Civil War. My grandfather was in the Civil War. These are interesting. There's a lead, looks like a lead weight. Has a hole in here, and it's used for an ink oil. By fixing up some carbon powder and with water, you make some ink. Here's another ink well. Here's various sized grape shot from the Civil War. This is something also that came from the Chicago fire. Here's some shells that came from the Mississippi River. They had a button factory there. And here are the buttons that they were cut out of the shells to make buttons on them. Someplace here there's one of the saws that they use to saw out the holes. This looks like a half a horseshoe. It's actually a half of the oxen shoe, or a split hoof, the oxen. Here's some more cannonballs, pieces of shells. Here's a piece of gunpowder from a big cannon. Here's something people very seldom guess what is. It's a cork gun stopper. A cork onto a brass fitting here, goes in the end of the gun to keep the mud out. I hope they always remember to take it out before they fire the gun though. And then up here are various other minerals and pieces of coral and various things. Down here on this shelf are some more minerals. Here's a powder horn. Put powder in. This came from the Chicago fire also. As you can see the indentations, it's pieces of screen and that all melded together. Porcupine quills, various. This is a corn husker's hook, in which when they husk corn, that thing would just catch right in the edge of the corn and just peel the shucks off. And they pick out the corn. I never got good enough to use one of these things, but I remember at home our hired man used to use these and go out shucking corn. Here's some old antique light bulbs. This is looks like a candle snuffer. It's actually used for trimming wicks. You can cut off the top of the wick straight across with this, and then the dirty part will be kept in here, and trim your wicks and then get them ready for night again. This is an Indian stone that they used for cutting or scraping or something like that. Here's the top of an Indian tomahawk. Another piece made by an Indian. They stick a stick in here. An antique mouse trap. There's some more fossils. There's a tribolite. And down here are more minerals and fossils. Some of these have numbers on them, and I have a book telling where they came from. Well, that just about does this cabinet, I think. Oh, some button hooks. I think most people recognize these. And let's see, going on around here, there's some an old wooden pulley up there that's sort of interesting. Wooden pulley, wooden wheel in it, and some ice tongs. I remember this hanging on our wall. It originally had a calendar on there that we used up, and I can't remember what year it was, but as far back as I can remember, that used to hang on our dining room wall. Here's some of my mother's old shoes. And here's some, these have some various antiques in them that I sort of kept for posterity, I guess. Here's an old slide, part of a pump, nail puller. Some more branding irons. One of these branding irons has a P on it. It stands for French. When Pete French had a big empire in southeastern Oregon, one of his branding irons had a P on it, and I guess it was Cy Taylor that gave it to me, and just for a souvenir. And here it is. You can see it has a P on it. Looks like it's been well used. Behind here is an old clock that's way over 100 years old. It has wooden wheels in it. Some of them had to be replaced, but once I got that fixed up to so it would run, but never did run too well, so I haven't done anything more about it. You can see we have a display of various things up on the wall there. This is filled up with a lot of old kitchen materials. Some of these are surgical instruments. These are some old wooden pill bottles that I found in the old office I bought. Some various old remedies. Here's a fruit knife that my mother had. I think it has a silver case on it, and it says Anna on it, which is my grandmother's name, Baston, Anna Baston Lee. Various tin bottles and tin cases and old pocketbook. Dolly made out of cork. There's a few buttons. There's button collections here. Some tatting shuttles. Here's one that's beautifully engraved on the outside there. About 6 or 8 padding shuttles, and here's some old crochet hooks. Some of these are made out of ivory. There's a knife made out of ivory also. Here's some more medical instruments, various sounds and catheters. Some old glass and metal syringes in the old days when we used to just have 1 or 2 syringes and washed them up and sterilized them each time. Here's an old sterilizer, the only sterilizer I had in my office for a long time, which you just put instruments and gloves in there to sterilize them. And these are those enamel bedpans and urinals, emesis basins and so on. Those that keep sterile things in. Now, of course, they're all individually encased and disposable, but we used to use everything over again. Here's a picture of my mother when she was a little girl. It was on a glass. It was on the reverse side of a glass, and it broke. Now I put it all together. These are cat-tip sutures. Another alcohol lamp. That was to hold needles. This is another one with the needles. It can be used for sewing up patients. Various kinds of sutures. Some games. Some of these belonged to me when I was a small boy, and some of them belonged to my mother and my grandfather. Here's some tin soldiers. These things are made out of sort of a soft brass that breaks easily. Back here are clay marbles, a collection that I had. More marbles. More marbles. These bottles of medicine we had in the office, we used iodine, ginseng violet, methylate. This is still full of ethyl chloride. Use these for anesthesia. I lanced lots of kids' ears. Way on down here, up above here, is a couple buffalo horns. I shot 5 animals in Africa when we were there in 1959 because one of the missionaries, his deep freezes our meat. And for $12 I could get a license to shoot 5 animals. I didn't especially want to go hunting, or I didn't need the horn especially, but as long as he wanted the meat, I was glad to go hunting. He loaned me a 500 Magnum gun. That swordfish up there, that end, was one that my grandfather got somewhere in California in the early days. Those other 2 spears were somebody picked up in Africa. There are some workboards that came from Webster City. My grandmother and my mother used to use them. Here's an old sewing machine that belonged to my grandmother, and then my mother took it to Nebraska in 1913 when she got married, and used it there for a long time. Then it was brought out here, and more or less just an antique now. This cabinet here was one that came from Webster City. My grandfather had it, in which he had his specimens of bird nests, bird eggs, and some shells in it. I took out some of the things and condensed them, and I filled up some of the top 2 shelves with antique medical instruments. These are some old IUDs. I took out some of these out of patients after I came to Prineville in 1939. They were still using them. These are holders for syringes. Quite a collection here, everything from glass syringes, metal syringes, to the modern plastic syringes and the throwaway syringes. These are our cases of needles, where they could sterilize a bunch of needles, and then after they sharpen them and sterilize them, and put them in these cases, and you can use them. Some more syringe cases. A lot of our sutures came in glass tubes like this in the old days, and you just broke the tubing. And below here are the way they were when my grandfather had them, full of shells. I think the rest of these are mostly filled with shells, sand dollars, starfish. Here's some more of those shells from Muscatine, Iowa, where they cut out pearl buttons. These are shells also. Souvenir of the World's Fair in St. Louis in 1904. Lord's Prayer written on a shell. I think that came at the same time from the World's Fair. Various nuts and seed pods from California and Florida. More shells. And here's a collection of birds' eggs. Here's what they are, but they've gotten all mixed up. These are specimens of fossils and rocks. All sorts of fossil corals. I bet if Tom Wilson knew these were here, he'd have some of them. Some of these are, most of these I think came from the Middle West. That takes care of that cabinet. Here's a baby scale that I used in my office to weigh the babies on. And here's a home scale, so you can hook a baby's basket on here and just pull down to show you how much it weighs. Oh, that's some antique circumcision rings. I don't think they've ever been used very much. Behind there is an old cautery machine. This is a machine that came from Dr. Rosenberg's office also. It's got a pump in. A pump that goes up and down and causes suction, both suction and pressure. And I think he used it to put a little negative pressure on the nasal sinuses. I don't think it's ever any great success anyway, but here's some scales with a weight you can hang on one end here and weigh something. Here's one of the old antique telephones that used to hang on the wall that you could ring up. I started to recondition. I never finished it. This is an office treatment chair to treat people on. There's some instruments behind there. This is one of the oldest machines before they had electricity for suction. This is what they called a Wangenstein suction. And a man a doctor in Minnesota first invented this. And the thing was that you just turn this upside down, and the water in one of these would go down into the other bottle, and it would cause a suction in the third bottle on the floor there, and a tube from that bottle into the chest cavity or wherever a person wanted suction, a patient. And the nurse had to be ready to turn it over again as soon as the water all ran through. And you'd have to turn it over again to produce suction again. It was quite an invention to have suction 24 hours a day for you wanted to keep blood or air out of the chest cavities or out of the abdomen before the days of electricity. In this cabinet here, this is a hat rack cabinet I got from Erickson's department store here in town one time when they were doing away with it. In the bottom I have some old magazines. Both drawers are filled up with magazines. And in here I have on the top here some old hats that date back to my grandfather's time. And in here are his Civil War things, the Civil War medal. Here's his Civil War hat, his cap, some buttons taken from Army coats in the Civil War. Here's some hardtack that he brought home in the Civil War of 1864. These came in big square, like a cracker, and they were thick, not like our crackers because they were about a half-inch thick. And here's a knife that came, an Army knife, the wooden handle. It has L-E-E there, Lee. My grandfather's name was Elon Lee. In those days you had to buy your own hats, haversacks, knapsacks, and so on. Here's his canteen. There's his knapsack. The rest of this is some old books in the bottom. Here's some broken pieces of guns, relics of the Civil War, also, and some ammunition and shells. This is an Army hat bag, faded, as you can see, but it went around the edge of a hat for parade purposes. Here's an 1856 magazine, some weaving shuttles used for weaving, just for winding up thread. Some Bibles date back to 1846 here. An 1880 Webster's Dictionary, a 1790 Life of Christ, and various other books down there. Here's some old trunks here that are filled with, mostly with old clothes and old blankets and so on. This trunk over here is filled with carpenter tools. Here's a crystal set radio that I was given when a boy. My cousin Eleanor and Edson Baston, who were teachers in Chicago, Illinois, had that in the 20s, And when they got a little better radio, they sent that to me. It had earphones. All there is in it is a coil and a condenser and a crystal. So there wasn't very much to go wrong. Or to work either, I found out. Here's an old Oliver typewriter that was for a doctor or a pharmacist, because it has all the symbols for prescription and for ounces and for grams, for scruples, various marks like that are used in prescription writing. I never used it. I'm not sure that Dr. Rosenberg ever used it. It was in his office, and he'd probably inherited it someplace. Here's a picture of the office that I took over from Dr. Rosenberg, located across from the old Ochiko Inn. This is Dr. Rosenberg's old ledger in which he kept his accounts in here for several years. Clothes rack. In the old days when you either had to dry your clothes outside on clear weather or dry them inside on a rack like this in the rainy weather, that was a useful item. Here's an old metal and glass syringe for giving shots. More. This says Dr. J.H. Rosenberg, and here are various pill cases. Here's another medical bag. Used to have medicine in it. When I first got these old bags from the old office, a lot of them I took medicine out because the kids wanted to play with them, and I was afraid some of the medicine was a little too poisonous for them to play with. Breast pump, a case of some more instruments, some knives, 4 different knives here. We're doing surgery. Oh, there's an old razor, made in England, Alfred Dunhill of London. Here's a razor with 7 blades, and they're dated on the edge of each one. It says Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I suppose you would sharpen these all up, and then they'd be ready for the whole week of shaving. Here's some more pills. Most of these were cathartic, CC pills, quinine, and so on. I used to have dozens of these little paper airplanes. My dad, long about in the 1920s, tried to sell candy in Omaha one time, and he also tried to sell these for 10 cents a piece. And he had somebody in the window of the candy store that made these airplanes and threw them around. He'd sell them for 10 cents a piece and try to attract them in to buy candy. These are some boxes of my Liam and Cheesebro letters that I've typed out. Whole boxes of them here. I think I made about 20 of every volume. These are some of my grandfather and grandmother's old cane-covered chairs that we had in Webster City, Iowa. I think all of these I recaned them after we came out here. But I put them out here because they are a little bit fragile, and I'm always afraid somebody might break them and then they feel badly. So, have we done these out? I guess we haven't done here. Here's some old lamps. Some old hats that we took on various trips and had people flying on some of our Sierra Club trips. Here's the horns of an elk I killed in 1947 up in the Ochigos. It was the biggest elk I ever killed, so I had to put the horns up here. This operating table was one in the old Prineville General Hospital, and then we moved it down to the clinic, and eventually they had to get a better table, so had no use for this, so they gave it to me. Here's some old doctor bags that look like they're well worn, with some bottles of iodine and methylate and various things in it. I think I have about a half a dozen of those old bags under there. This old sewing machine is an old antique one for sewing leather. And here's a saddle. The story of this is that my grandfather was down south between his two enlistments in the Army. He went down to visit the Army just to see how they were coming. And while he was there, he visited his uncle, Mr. Charles Lee, who was a captain in the cavalry. And while he was there, his uncle got killed. And so he took this saddle home and took his uncle's body home to his wife. The story of this saddle was that it was once a Confederate saddle, and it was captured by his uncle in the Civil War when one of the Confederate horses was killed, and so he'd used the saddle on his horse. There's some more horns. Here's a topi that was also killed in Africa, and there's a water buck. These are a few horse collars. There's a complete set of harness in there for horses. There's some bridles and some neck yokes and various things in there. That's all horse harness in there. Now the story of this cabinet here, my grandfather was owed some money. In one of the books there, I've got a story of how he got it. Somebody owed him some money. I think it was $300 that he owed him, and he never could pay it. And as he was a fairly good carpenter, he offered to make him a cabinet in order to do away with the debt. So he made him this cabinet. And in this cabinet, we've got various collections of things like railroad tickets, glasses, shirt studs, collar buttons, various papers and pictures and things like that. I won't bother to open it up. Here's some candlesticks. When Janice got married, her brother Donnie had a hobby of using a welding machine, and so he made these candle holders for her to use in the wedding. And then they had to get some great big round candles to put on them, and they use these. You can see there's places for candles in various places here. Behind here is some. Here's an old trunk that has copper rivets in the top, made out of leather, and in this are the toys of my mother when she was little. There's a table tennis, some Bible authors, touring, kaleidoscope. It's clear full of old blocks, games and things like that. Some old books and atlases here that are quite old. This is an old piano. So that piano is a sort of a grand piano. The whole top raises up, and it's short one octave on the keyboard. So it's a little shorter than the ordinary piano. It's sort of a transition between a harpsichord and a piano, I believe. At least somebody told me that. And my grandmother got that when she was a little girl. Her father bought it for her, and she gave piano lessons. before she and my grandfather were married. And she took it from Wisconsin to Iowa, and it was in the house in Webster City, Iowa, as far back as I can remember. Here is one of those goldenrod vacuum cleaners that a person could use. If you pump this real hard, it caused a very small vacuum in the bottom. And it's in pretty good shape because I doubt it was ever used very much. That was in my grandmother's house there also. Here's their old Victrola. I'll have to turn it on. I remember us kids used to just love to play that. We must have had a half a dozen different records, and we'd play them every chance we got. This is another old sewing machine that's in a little better shape than the other one. This was a music cabinet. This Victrola always sat on this in our living room in Webster City. It's filled with some old children's toys. This is a rocking chair that goes with those other chairs that I showed you. And then this is our fancy parlor furniture. There were 4 of these chairs, one rocker, and then this Davenport. And they're all covered with horsehair. And they sat in the parlor in the south room there in Webster City, Iowa. And us kids never got to go in there very often. We stayed out in the other room. It was in the parlor that they had all these curio cases and cabinets. This is something that we used to have in Webster City, and we cooked our meal with. It was called a fireless furnace, fireless cooker. And you could cook up your beans or your soup or your cereal. And this is a sort of a vacuum case, and you could put your things in here boiling hot. And if you wanted to, you could heat up the stone at the bottom also, and that would keep them hot all night long, so that you could cook the cornmeal or your cereal and up in here or whatever you wanted to cook. And this top insulator on top here, and then closed it up. They stay hot, and your beans could be cooked the next morning and be all ready to go. It saved fuel, saved trying to keep the fire warm all night. These are also some old horns. This a wreath here was made, I think this was also made by a cheese brewer, and I think it was Babel Cheese Brewer. It took a prize in some of the county fairs sometime. The whole wreath is made out of nothing but seeds. You can identify various kinds of corn, flowers, seeds, nuts, peppers, and so on. Some of the flowers up there are made out of rolled rice kernels glued together. At one time when we brought this out here, a lot of those had fallen apart, and I glued some of them back on. Here's a basket full of keys, key collection. This has some old accounts and postcards and business things from my grandfather's lumber yard that he started in Webster City in 1874. This old radio still works. I think it's a Philco. Well, I think that just about does up this part of the museum. There's, I can't get at these other things, but some of these are some old tools. There's a toolbox. A handmade wooden toolbox that my grandfather had back in Webster City. And I can remember it well because my grandfather was always after me to put the tools back. Every time I used a hammer or a saw or a plane out of there, I'd leave it all around the yard. And when he'd come and find some of the things missing out of the toolbox, and I can remember he'd get after me and wonder where I'd left them. So I'm sure that a lot of these are rusty because I left them out in the there's some awls and some wrenches and old hammers in there. There's another box of old tools, braces and bits and saws. That chest there is filled with carpenter's tools, but I can't get at it, so I guess we'll have to take a picture of those some other day.